We want to get going.
We're recording. I've got extra gum.
You just got me the.
Alan, you ready?
Okay, all right, we'll do Thursday.
Yeah.
All right.
Myself and
Okay, so we should be good on that. All right, thanks. You have an agenda there?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okay, let's get the agendas.
Yep, I went ahead and print some out this time. So there's the agenda.
No, that's interesting.
The dog got sick over here. Just my second one. Wasn't the kids, nothing makes me sick, because I'm a mom of more than nine
No, you have a total sympathy monitor. I was female.
Hey, Alan,
Yes, sir.
did you put any of the concrete issues on here?
And I was like, what is that?
Under other, I didn't make it into that because it wasn't in the original
They got me.
agenda, but under other business, I have 3 other things that I've come up since we put the agenda.
Okay, I understand.
I
All
was
right.
trying to say something funny and she's laughing at
Mm,
That's the
Pretty
truth.
long.
That is the Hayes family. So,
Okay, I'm gonna call the, street committee, to order February 2nd, or February 12th, 2018. It's approximately 5:14. Can you do a roll call, please?
Walther.
Here.
Carter. Here. Hayes. Here.
And do the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Alan, you ready? We got 45
Yes.
minutes here.
I'm sorry.
14 items. It'll be awesome.
14 plus 3.
Let's go ahead and start with Oak Meadow. Let's get that one out of the way.
Okay, Oak Meadow, the 50% set of plans was submitted in December. We had American Structure Point do a review of that 50% set of plans. They came back with a fairly lengthy review, and since getting that back from Structure Point, I've reviewed that with Jobs. Couple of the items weren't really applicable. Several of the items were kind of a pre-90% submittal commentary. So a lot of their comments shouldn't have been expected at the 50% stage, but at the same time were helpful. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. At this point, there's a couple items remaining to get to the 90% review. 2 of those items are potholing, to discover the location of the water line, and also discover the exact location of the gas line, as those will have a little bit of an effect on where we put the path along the east side of Oak Meadow. So at this point, I would like to go ahead and release them to start working towards a 90% submittal. I can certainly provide review comments that Structure Point gave if you would like to see them, although I did not include them or print them off specifically for the meeting.
Okay. I would probably like, if I could get the reviews, that'd be awesome.
Yep.
Second question I have for you is, do you have a budget update?
The budget is still the same as it was that we reviewed in December.
Okay.
Construction's at $635,000 from the street fund. Sidewalk, we were planning to use $65,000 from the fee and lieu. And inspection would be $50,000 from the street fund for a total budget of $750,000. Obviously, that does not include engineering, as we've already encumbered those funds.
And just so that everybody knows, that is about $150,000 over budget, is that correct?
By adding in the drainage and the drainage on Hickory, yes. Over our original idea.
Okay, I guess one of the things that I would want to look at and make sure before we go on is, and I'm sure that Job's already done this, but just the existing utilities, not the underground, but the poles, the water boxes, all those things, we know where those things are so that we don't incur more expense with those. I know in the plan, or in the budget that we were given back in December, it does not have a utility relocation line item.
Right.
So if that's changed, I just want to make sure that hasn't changed. We're not and we fighting a gas line the whole way with the storm sewer or that kind of thing. That's the biggest thing I have, and I'm sure that that's probably one of the biggest things Jobs doesn't wanna redo. I certainly don't want them to get to 90% and go, hey, there's a water line in our way, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, well, we've done, a full survey was done before they started design on the project, so all the boxes and hydrants and poles and all that should have been picked up.
Okay.
And from what I've viewed, they are all on there. So then the difference would be that water line and that gas line, which we need to dig on to see where those are at, and those could change. I don't think the changes will be significant, it's just a matter of moving it a few feet one way or the other.
I didn't hear you.
The Columbia Gas will be doing their pothole.
Okay, good.
on
So
their-
we're gonna Columbia Gas before we move forward.
Yes.
And they've already said that they would move,
And they've already set a date, and we're working with them to do that.
and they'll move their own line at their cost.
Are they in the right of way?
Yes.
They're in right of way. Okay, perfect. Well, it doesn't cost us anything. That's good.
No, they'll move it at their cost if it needs to be moved.
Okay. Any questions?
Nope. Good information. That one's still the 750,000, that's the whole project, right?
Everything but engineering.
But the engineering,
Right.
okay. But we're still working in phases.
Well, it's a whole project, but we're doing this in submittals. He's talking about phases of submittal.
I see.
But
Okay.
this one is not being done in any phases of the project itself. For instance, like we talked about in the ramp, it's not being,
1 year, next year.
yeah,
whatever.
this
I
would
see.
be, we'd let this project go and
Okay.
do the whole thing if we could afford it at that point,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, and the 2018 budget does reflect these numbers, the 750,000 for construction. So at least we have that planned in for this year.
This year is all, okay.
All right.
So before moving to 90%, you wanted to see the review, and
If I can get a half size, that'd be awesome too.
Okay.
I've got the old one here, it doesn't show the drainage on Hickory.
okay,
And then, I just feel comfortable going through it if I could.
absolutely.
And then we can, I don't wanna hold up the 90%, but I think you still gotta get, do you know when the gas company's gonna come out and pothole? 2 weeks?
They haven't given us a date yet.
Okay.
They've said they were coming out, they haven't submitted right away,
No.
so.
Okay. Well, if I can get a set of plans, I can get this done in 2 days for you.
Okay.
And you guys, I mean, we could easily look at it at the next meeting, but I don't know that, you know, the basic, so I think maybe what would be helpful would be just kind of, a basic overview of it. You know, it's 19 feet wide, it's, you know, berm on both sides, we've got one side with a leisure trail. We're piping, most of it, but not all of it. There's still gonna be some ditches. There's been a lot of questions that have come up, is this gonna have curb, is it not gonna have curb? Well, it does have curb in some places, but not in all places. You know, those kind of questions, I think, are gonna be helpful to understand what $750,000
I think that's a good idea, Andy, just with, all of the discussions over the past year and how it's morphed and, you know, what we've had to do to make it fit, it's,
Probably
I'm sure you guys are doing a fabulous job.
an updated, you know, second sheet with detail. Maybe an updated second sheet and one sheet that shows the project in whole. So, profile sheet and one sheet that shows the whole project, you know, in general. That would be probably extremely helpful just to have. Okay, any other questions on that?
Nope, good.
Alrighty, Graham Road Cowmore project.
Graham Road Commodore, there's really no update. I have not, I talked to the one neighbor, and he said he had actually talked to Mr. Fife's son, and he's supposed to get me contact information from Mr. Fife's son, and he has not got that to me yet. So once I get that, I was planning to talk to the Fifes.
And they are for what, opening up, for reestablishing the drainage pattern?
Correct.
Okay, that'd be good.
It would be good. I don't know if they're gonna do it, but I will at least ask them to, as I think I gave them the update, or maybe we had talked at the last committee meeting in December that we were gonna tell Mr. Fife that that's illegal. Mr. Zetz kinda had the opinion that we don't push that issue too much, cause it is a civil issue. Just say, hey, it is illegal, you don't give them any kind of written, hey, cause then they would expect follow-up. whereas he doesn't, Mr. Zest didn't think a follow-up was necessarily the responsibility of the city, other than just trying to facilitate that getting back.
You're basically just doing him a favor by letting him know that he is acting against state statute.
Yes.
That's probably, yep. Nice
So
guy.
that's what I'm planning to do once I get the contact information for his son, who's a little more, who's the neighbor's been talking to more and thinks that might behoove us.
Okay.
That's good.
Retention, detention, basin inventory analysis?
The main point on this, I guess there's two. One would be the ordinance that I gave out at the December 4th meeting, wondering if there was any commentary on that, and Suzanne, I copied you on that here last week. I know I had some of my own commentary on it, didn't know if council, or if streets committee had any specific commentary on that yourselves.
You said you gave out a handout on the 4th?
Yes, I believe it was included in that packet that I gave on the floor.
I think it was.
It's basically the proposed legislation, the top at 1119.09.
Okay. I don't have that with me. I thought I had everything from the last meeting. Or I should say the 4th, meeting of the 4th. I don't seem to have that. I do recall going through that though. This was the proposal, what was gonna happen in 2018 with a budget number to it?
This was the proposed legislation that I'm talking about now, which is basically taking chapter 1119 and then section 09 and adding an H to it that determines how we will move forward in the event where no maintenance covenant exists for a stormwater basin. So it's trying to clean up the old ones.
So right, we had comments to that. Did you, I do now remember what you're talking about. We had comments to that, and especially, if I remember correctly, it was specifically to the last paragraph that you had added on there and how, boy, I think details on that one. Do you have,
I wish I had my notes in front of me.
I don't either.
The notes that
you know
I
what?
have, and I thought we left that with you guys, were gonna look at it more since you didn't really have a whole lot of time to look at it and then bring things back. So the notes that I have are work with owner, assess, and cease illegal discharge. And what it says in here now is that we could cut that off. I don't know that cutting it off really helps us, and I think that's what we discussed.
I think that was the
before.
point to it.
Right, and I had written down some other notes about either one would be assessment if not compliant, and the other option would be penalties in accordance with section 1119.10, which do apply to this. If
Okay.
they're in violation.
Gotcha. I do recall all those comments now,
Okay.
so,
Remember the conversation.
yeah. Are you looking for something more from us at this point?
Only if you had other comments after you had time to look over it, and obviously Suzanne being new, so her to get a chance to weigh in on it.
Right.
How about the next one? Can you make those changes, those proposed changes, and let us see it again?
Yep.
That'd be great. I had in my notes from the 4th also a note saying the 2018 Streets Committee to approve a $30,000 budget item, essentially, 5 for engineering, 25 for maintenance. Is that still something you have on your project list, I guess, is the best way to put it?
And that was the second part of this, would be the project list.
Okay.
So I'm getting everything out of order now. The project list that, sorry, I'm losing, as I bring out folders, I'm losing where I'm at. The two projects that looking at for this year, one is the Amherst Village, that is a detention pond. Somebody had put a couple boards over the bottom of the pipe for the outlet and turned it into a retention pond. It has been like that for a while. It silted in pretty good. Then after we started having that conversation, somebody went out and took those boards off. So it is now a detention pond again, which is a good thing. However, where the banks of the retention pond have eaten out, it's not mowable, and it's pretty well silted in as well. So the plan on that one would be to It's established its own channel, will be to basically keep that channel, perhaps line it with some riprap, something that's gonna stabilize it, remove the silt, and then fill in with clay, put some topsoil in, soften those banks, make it mobile. That one is one where there really isn't an HOA that I'm aware of, and it is an easement more or less on a couple different pieces of private property. So it's not a reserve area, so it'd be hard to put that one on an HOA. So that's one that I thought doing in-house would be good. I know the landowner said that he's happy to mow it where it's mowable.
Okay. What was number 2?
Number 2 is Hazelwood Section 4, Part 2. This one, again, is one where it's easements on several pieces of private property, no specific preserve. I think we can work towards some kind of stormwater facilities maintenance agreement with an HOA there, but the main problem with this one is vegetation. I think somebody had put a garden in it at one point. It is a detention basin, and there's cattails in there that are over your head. So if we were able to go in and do the work to remove the vegetation, clean it up, make it mowable, and then kind of have that as a negotiating point potentially with the HOA, say, hey, look, we'll do this to get it into shape, but in the future you need to provide a maintenance agreement to do it yourself. I don't have numbers on what those would be, but I presume that we can do it within the budget that you mentioned.
Okay. I guess I have a couple questions on those. Because the Amherst Village one is really a beautification, is it functioning with the boards off? Now that the boards are off, is it functioning properly?
I would
Just
say it is functioning as...
Without doing a volume calculation?
Yes,
It's functioning properly?
yes.
Okay. And same thing with Hazelwood. Is it functioning properly?
With as much vegetation as on that one, I don't know. My guess would be that the outlet structure is intact and functioning. So the outlet structure, I would say yes, so that should more or less mean the basin.
Okay. I guess what I'm thinking is, as far as, because these are essentially beautification projects, Roundup goes a long way on cattails.
Okay?
And as far as silt in a pond, a dozer redistributing it and reseeding it goes pretty far too. Are any of these over an acre? I mean, is this gonna be somewhere we've gotta go get an NOI and we gotta play? No, they're not that big?
Correct.
Okay. So, okay.
And then the rest of the basins that are problems are all tied to an HOA, so we plan to go out and get the stormwater maintenance agreements with them if they're not in place currently. At least once we get the ordinance in place to do that.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I do, but it's not a well formulated. How do we not put ourselves in the same position that we're in now with retention, detention ponds and having to go back into areas and do what we're doing? Like, how do we get to the point where that's just like something that is understood, that those aren't for decorative or personal use? It just seems like someone sees it in their yard and maybe it's just an innocent, hey, that's really neat, I'm gonna turn that into my own personal pond.
So to answer that, the code does say that there's supposed to be a stormwater maintenance agreement, a covenant and an agreement for all stormwater basins. At some point that did not happen with some of these. So what we have come up with is a stormwater facilities maintenance agreement, worked with legal on that, and we have one that's more or less a standard. So what we are doing, and working with planning and zoning, is we are including that in every project, whether it be a subdivision or a major development that has stormwater basins, and getting them and having them sign that agreement, and then they will include that agreement in the HOA documents. There's a better name.
They
for those.
being who?
The developer will include that in
Okay.
the deed restrictions.
Got it.
In the HOA documents, so every person that buys a piece of property will understand that there is a a stormwater basin, and that the HOA is responsible for it.
Is there anything that we can do to go back to write it? I mean, can you fix that with things that we haven't done in the past?
That's what this proposed legislation is for, is to say, okay, if it doesn't have one, then you need
This'll
to make
trump
it have one. And if
Okay.
you, and that's where we were talking about, it currently says plug it, we don't wanna plug it, that's not gonna solve any problems. But we can either assess penalties or
Okay.
do it ourselves and assess them.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. I'm gonna have a lot of those weird questions just to
Okay,
get
no.
caught up.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Okay. I guess, when do you want to go over your report of major drainage issues? What part of that, of this agenda do you want to try to,
I have that as item number 11.
okay. Okay, we can hold off till then.
Okay.
All right, I just was trying to tie them together with the first two, or the 3 and 4, I guess. Bristol Drive, any updates on that?
No update on that. We have not been able to coordinate to get a survey when there has not been snow on the ground and you can actually get back there. So that is still in the works, and we're working to get that survey. Once we have the survey, we'll know more.
Are you staying in communication with the resident out there who's been vocal about this?
I had let him know that we were working to get survey, and that was over a month ago, so I have not talked to him in at least a month.
I don't know if you do it via email or just give them a call, but I would just suggest letting them know that this hasn't been dropped, we're just waiting on a survey to get done, as we were a month ago.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions on Bristol? All righty. Columbia Road culvert replacement.
Columbia Road culvert replacement, as I had reported at the last council meeting, we worked with Law. They originally submitted a $45,000 change order. We got that down to $18,000. They agreed to that. So where we are at now is we're going to process the pay app because it is less than the original contract amount. And the next step will be approval of the change order. And I don't see us needing to pay that until they have the next pay application, which will be after the final asphalt and striping and any other, there's just a few small details left. So the numbers on this are, the original contract was $179,000. The change order for $18,000 takes us up to $197,000. But there's also some work that I directed with the asphalt because the culvert got shifted that's going to be over and above that. I believe it's only gonna be in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $5,000, but I would also like to not have to come back and ask for, again, a second time. So my anticipated intent at least is to take that up to $210,000. So that would be, unfortunately, because this was a 2017 PO, we can't increase it, and we only did the resolution for the $179,000. We need more money. We'd have to come back to council for that. So I'm looking at coming back for another $31,000 on that to take it to $210,000. For reference, our original budget on this project was $300,000. The engineer's estimate was $225,000, and then it came back at $179,000. So we're still well under budget. It's just going back and asking for more because we didn't ask for enough, I guess, because of the changes. That makes sense.
It does.
Just a comment, I know you and I talked about the erosion control out there. They haven't done anything. We've got unprotected ditches going right to the creek. My suggestion would be to at least get some silt fence or some hay bales up or something, just to,
And
just temporary status.
Okay, I didn't want to ask them for anything until we kind of worked some of these details.
Even if our own guys went out and threw up some silt fence,
And
it'd
our
probably be a
guys
good
are
idea.
our guys are gonna work on the ditch on the east side and put some straw matting down, clean that out, put some straw matting down.
That's a good idea. Okay. Any other questions on that? Columbia Road Bridge.
No update on that, just a placeholder for when it does become an issue again.
Okay. Any update on Taylor? I'm sorry, I'm gonna go through these kind of quickly. Any questions on the bridge? Any update on Taylor Road?
Taylor Road, we have still not heard anything out of the contractor, which at this point is just as well, cause I think we're not gonna use them. But Mr. Zetz directed that we need to wait a little bit longer and then we can say they walked away because there wasn't a whole lot of language in the agreement. We are investigating other opportunities to see if we can get this done cheaper. Our original plan was for concrete pipe. We were looking at what it would take to line it. That way we wouldn't have to tear up the road. The initial estimate we got back was about the same as a new pipe. The other option is concrete paving of the bottom of the culvert, which is a technique where you can use rebar to connect each side of the rusted out corrugated metal pipe if it's still intact, and then you tie that together with concrete, and you can achieve about 90 to 95% of the original strength with that. I haven't got any numbers to see if that's of value yet, but as we were planning on waiting until school's out anyways, we got a little time to see if we can't do something a little cheaper and less invasive.
I was gonna ask that, what's the time frame for that to be closed again for repair?
We're gonna wait till after school because
Okay.
we've been keeping an eye on it, and it has not deteriorated any further. We had the hole, we filled it, we patched it. It has not deteriorated any further, so I think we can wait. At this point, we're planning to wait until after school.
Awesome. While it's being repaired, you think it, did you say 30 days? Is that what the original estimate was?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Might have
I'm
been
just
short.
bracing myself for that one.
It was concrete is what we're planning to put back on the road, so that was gonna take a couple weeks. And replacing it would take a week to 2 weeks, so,
Okay.
yeah, it shouldn't take more than 30 days. And if we are able to just repair the bottom of it, well, we might not have to close the road or minimize at least that closing while they're working on it to a week, week and a half.
Okay.
Alrighty, any update on Headley? I think this one is one that's done, correct?
So, the situation out there is we went ahead and, so the creek
It's
is.
the Oxbow.
Yeah, so there was my understanding is there was a log jam that caused it to reroute itself. So we did go out and put, and stabilize that bank as a temporary solution. I would like to, as a permanent solution, reroute the creek back to where it was prior to that log jam. I actually talked to the Army Corps today. That would require a nationwide permit. They sent me some information on it. The permits aren't, if it's a nationwide permit, they're fairly cheap and
Okay.
fairly, there's not too much involvement on that.
Okay.
It's relatively easy. You're still dealing with the court.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem like it.
Is it a bank improvement, or are you guys having to, we're not buying any credits or anything, are we?
No, when I explained it to the lady today, I said, basically we're just digging out what was filled in, putting it into what was cut out. And she did say something about a water quality, it may qualify for water quality something. So there's that, but I don't know what that is yet. Or if it applies to us.
So, have you guys noticed any additional erosion? Is it pretty stable right now?
It's pretty stable right now. We put a good amount of large riprap in there, and then capped it with 2s and 3 or 4 to stabilize the surface. So I think it'll last for 6 months. Will it last for much longer than that? I have my doubts. And I'd definitely like to do something permanent before we do that section of Headley's Mill, repaving it. Otherwise, we're just gonna continue our problems.
Alrighty, nationwide permit. The 2018 ramp,
No update on that. I am working on the RFP. Unfortunately, I have not been able to get that out yet. I'm gonna get that out as soon as I can, hopefully by the end of the week.
I went out and looked at Headley's Mill, and I do think that Patterson seems to be a really good, it's a 60-40 type of split, Patterson Road at Headley's Mill.
Sure, quarter?
Maybe it's quarter. No, quarter goes to the south. I'm cut from the north. Patterson comes in from the north,
Yeah.
right? And it seems like everything east of Patterson is in need of some work.
Okay,
And it seems like west of it, not so bad.
okay.
That was my take on it. I know you'd said you'd looked at it, I was gonna go out and look at it. That was my take on it. Patterson's right there with it's kinda got the new horse barn there and the split rail fence and, is that Patterson? That's Patterson, right?
Is that Patterson? Yeah, I think that is Patterson,
I think it is.
because it's right after the curve that we're talking about, yes.
Yeah. So, and Suzanne and I talked about this, the idea was to do a full RFP for all of Headley's Mill, but be able to break it up into a phasing. We were talking about a 50% phasing, but then we started looking at the numbers, and if we didn't do the chip seal, we did some other things, we could get a little bit more out of it. So anyhow, I just wanted to mention that I had gone out and looked at it, and I felt pretty comfortable with Patterson being kind of that, with everything to the west kind of just being some pothole fixing, some berm fixing, that type of stuff.
Okay. I guess I thought Patterson would be more like a 70-30 split.
Might be, I didn't do
Okay.
an exact, but it felt like, by driving, it felt like it was a 60-40 split.
Okay.
Could be more, could be less,
Okay.
I don't know. Okay, great. Leave that alone. I'm gonna skip over 11 for right now.
Okay.
12, improvements, the impact of Licking Heights improvements to local roads.
I didn't have anything specifically put together on that. I know we don't want to put it on the agenda to chat about, have some
So-
ideas, but,
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear the ideas.
well, of course, we're adding Cable Road to this year so that we can
Mhm.
hold that together and get a chip seal on it. Beyond that, we've, at least briefly at one point or another, talked about roundabouts. I think that Summit and Havens Corner would be a great place for one.
Well, I think the idea on this was to coordinate with the school district
Uh-huh.
to work together with our roadway plans and upgrades that may be necessary with them. They're gonna have opportunities that we don't have
Mhm.
to get grants, to get money
Okay.
for roads that are going to directly affect their new high school and middle schools. And we need to coordinate with them so that we know what, if there are roads that we're going to restrict them from utilizing for construction traffic, we should know that. This is an idea to try to protect the roads as much as possible, but yet also work with them to get the roads out there and in place, kind of like during the time that the schools are being built, rather than reacting to them after they're built.
Right.
I think that's the gist of that, and Mel, anything else that you can add to it, but that was what I understood by bringing this topic, to the committee, was that was our goal.
Okay.
Well, and I'll say, I talked to Dr. Wagner briefly at the end of last week, and he told me that, he had been with the mayor, at, I don't know, some meeting, but it's with the developer of the Summit Road, some new housing going in on Summit that backs up to Cleveland.
Okay, yes.
Whatever, so forth. And that, he said something along the lines of the, developer agreed to pay for the traffic study, which BJ proceeded to say that that's part of the deal, that the developers pay for the traffic study.
So you say the traffic study, yes, we did, that development would need to provide a traffic impact study for that development.
Okay.
And then my understanding is the developer and the schools talked, and the developer was willing, we had a requirement for 2 entrances. Cause they wanted to use one off of Summit Road originally, and I said, no, we need to have 2 access points. So then they wanted to put 2 on Summit Road, and I said, that's not really what I was looking for one off of Cleveland for better flow and better, access. So they took that as the fire department also has a concern with second access point. And I think the conversation happened between the developer and the school was that the developer would give some area along Cleveland for a bus garage, and then that would be their cross access from Cleveland, so it would satisfy the fire department, but not really
The second
Nice.
access for us.
right.
Well, and that's why I try to coordinate the right people and stay out of that discussion, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. I was like, yes, the traffic study. But with that, what I was thinking is, because that entire road is impacted by everything that's going on. I mean, there's more than that, Facebook up at Beach, right near that whole 4-way stop and the turn from Morse onto Summit, which is already bad. Even with the 4-way stop now, accidents happen there all the time when people come over that little hill. Between that and now we're talking the school, we're putting the high school and the middle school out someplace where there's not even enough access for the current high school. And then there's gonna be, 225 houses now along Summit Road. It seems like when we start talking about comprehensive plans and something we're not prepared for, this is a huge issue. I mean, it's already an issue if you're out there. You cannot, in the morning, turn from Taylor onto Havens. If you're heading north to turn onto Havens Corners, you can't, because it's a steady traffic flow coming in from Gahanna. And then when you get to that four-way stop, if at Summit and Havens Corners, I did see the mayor lose a few shades of color when you said roundabout last time, but it's an entire area is an issue. So that's where my concern is. I know that we don't have the money to do it. I know that, Morpsey's already whatever with Mink Road. Okay, fine. But we have to address what's about to happen to that area. It's bad.
And I don't know, I have a solution, I'll tell you what we are working on. So one, Morpsey was actually here last week, and Nick Gill was talking to us about a regional thoroughfare plan, which I think they have a little bit of an eye. See, he has a look on his face there, they're looking at, the regional, how people go, and their thing was titled from 33 to 161, which kind of comes back to Mink, but there's a thoroughfare plan, access to that, where they're at least saying we'd also be looking at Broad Street and that kind of thing. And then that also ties into the comprehensive plan, which would give us our local thoroughfare plan, which I'd of course be involved with that. The challenges, of course, like you said, we don't have the money, you can put so much on developers, but I think there's a limit to that. Like, okay, obviously if the traffic impact study shows that they're gonna need a left turn into the school or a right turn, they'll need to put that in, but actually addressing the traffic on a larger scale, I think that's where the third federal plan is gonna help us, at least to show, the comprehensive plan will help us to show, well, here's where we have needs, even though we kind of know that'll factor into, I guess the next step would be looking for funding sources to do that.
The plan, what is the time frame on having something like that completed?
From our standpoint, well, with the comprehensive plan, whatever that timeline is, and I think they have in their proposals like right around 7 to 9 months, depending on how we time things. And
Because
then
I guess that's my concern is, it's kind of the same thought process as when when Main Street was done and they came through and redid the pavement, and we said, we're gonna go ahead and get the electrical and the water fixed at the same time. Because here we have all of these construction projects going on, and then it would make no sense to go through a huge project and then have to turn around and come back and fix things and change things.
So,
I guess I'm just feeling a little bit of panic. I mean, that area is already congested. It's difficult to travel through. There's no sidewalks for people to ride a bike or walk. There's a bunch of teenagers driving in the dark in the mornings. So it's something that, people have asked me about, and every time I drive down, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do in a year?
So, as you know, Nick is working on a regional plan.
Yep.
That I've been working on for the last year with him.
Okay.
So there needs to be, what I think this is saying, and what Mel's saying very clearly is, the city, the schools, the school district, Licking Heights, Jefferson Township, New Albany, and Pataskala, as well as Jersey Township, needs to put their heads together and figure out what's going on in this area, because what you mentioned is half of what's going on up there. So, I mean, it's gonna get bad quickly, and Morpsey really is so the comprehensive plan isn't going to help us with this. That's not what, I mean, in my opinion, the comprehensive plan isn't gonna tell us you need 3 lanes rather than 2 lanes. It's gonna show you, populations, and it's gonna show you the differential between today and 2040, but it's gonna tell you that the roads are failing, and you gotta figure out, what's gonna happen after that. So that's Morpsey. So I would hope that if Nick's been out here, anyhow, I think it's really important that the entities, the stakeholders, including the schools, because they're a huge stakeholder in this.
Yes.
And that's
But
where the
that
grant
way,
piece
when
is good.
developers come in, we can say, this is gonna be your part of this big picture, including those in Jefferson Township that are about ready to go.
Yeah.
So,
What is the, I mean, and again, I don't have any expertise in this area, what is the precedent for that? I mean, starting that discussion now, getting those stakeholders together, looking at the big picture, and starting it right now, so we can be prepared. I mean, at the very least, even aside from the road, or from the schools and the new houses coming in, we have a population of people who live there now, who expect to be able to get out of their driveway, and that's about to change.
I would suggest a partnership with the schools in the city to start this discussion, to get this is my thoughts on it. School in the city, have at least a discussion about it, and get, Morpsey and the adjacent areas, adjacent municipalities involved, to say, we've gotta figure this out, we've got a small window here to start really looking at these intersections and these areas, because really, we don't have a lot in it right now. I mean, Pataskla doesn't. It's really the north end to us, and it's not, we don't have a lot of population going north. I mean, we have people traveling through Pataskla, and we have Gahanna coming through Pataskla. We have Reynoldsburg coming through Pataskla to get to those centers, those work centers. But Morpsey needs to be a piece of this puzzle to try to get money for it. But the intersections that you're speaking of, they need to be addressed now. Summit and Morse doesn't have a four-way stop.
Not Summit and Morse, the one at
Beach.
Clark
Oh, you're
State
talking about-
and Clark State and Morse where it crossed over
Oh,
the
you're talking about
beach.
Beach, Clark State,
Yeah,
and Morse,
so
yes.
if you're
Which
trying,
was terribly done by Licking
Terribly
County.
done.
Licking County should be part of this. I
because
mean,
as
they
you-
should certainly be a part of this
What's our
discussion.
timeline?
Well, I
mean,
think
don't-
New Albany's, what's the word? I'm-
Annexing?
Yes, I think.
Well,
they've
they'll
annexed
annex to
those.
Morse Road, yes, that is correct.
So I think it's just us in New Albany there now, I don't think the county's.
The county is everything from Beach out to the east. The annexation won't happen,
Oh,
past
Okay.
Beach.
So Suzanne brings a good point, a timeline, so we should,
This
I
has
would
to
like to
start
s-
now.
I would like to see a timeline, like an immediate conversation, between the city and the school district. And then,
I hate to say the word deadline, because that sounds like you're being like authoritative, but like, I think the word is timeline. So if we're starting the conversation now, at what points do we wanna see progress? Like, do we wanna sit down and come up with like what we wanna see at different points? That way we have like short-term goals to reach our long-term goals, so that we're not, this is a very large project. And this is something, I mean, but what needs to happen now and in small increments to get to where we want it to be? Does that mean, am I making?
Oh, I think it's, absolutely, and
I
there's
think it's
some
very
stuff out there.
overwhelming.
There's a TID that's out there for Licking County that can be utilized for funding purposes. Lozier is running that. So anyhow, there's a lot of avenues to go, but I think the first steps, if you wanna say, is the city and the school district need to get together, because we're gonna have more voice, with the school district as a partner on this.
If we're proactive.
Because being proactive, we've got reasons to do so, we've got school buses, we've got kids. That's gonna give everybody more reason to,
Well, and you're extending a hand of community friendship. Nobody's been killed. This isn't something that we've had a major thing happen that has been devastating to our community. We are starting now, because we all know that, I mean, as parents, we can look at this and go, it is a matter of time before one of these kids, they just don't think, steps out,
kids
walks
are,
in the wrong spot. I can tell you that my kid has the greatest intentions, but yet I look at him and, what are you doing? And so, I mean, that's just the nature of the child, and so to start this now before our community has
there's
something
already,
bad happen.
there'll be an accident, a morning rear ender at, just the intersection of Summit and, Cable. And that holds up
Everything.
everything, buses.
Kids in the door to the
So,
school.
I think the word is
schools are an avenue
partnership.
to get to the big picture, and the big picture is all these communities have the same problems. This
Yep.
problem is they have roads that are insufficient and are going to fail because of the development that's coming. And somebody has to start the discussion, otherwise everybody will kind of react to it as necessary.
So I'm obviously BJ involved in that, but who's the contact there at the school then? Is that Dr. Wagner?
I
Oh,
was with
yeah.
Dr. Wagner.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Wagner, they don't, I mean, obviously, they don't.
They're gonna go up to him anyway, so if he's.
Well, they
going
don't
to-
have a
And, you know,
department they handle stuff.
this is a good way to work with the school rather than against the school. We're not being authoritative, we're being partnering, so
And
it's.
he might wanna start a small subgroup that would be working on this, but at least it would be his decision.
Well, and I just think that we've come a long way with the partnerships that we have in our community on a number of levels. And I think that this is just the next step in that, obviously. So, yes, sooner the better, anyhow.
Thank you.
Okay, and then for the thoroughfare planning part of that, yeah, we did meet with Morpsey, and they're gonna want us to kick in on that. I don't know what our share is gonna be, somewhere around 10 to 20,000, I think is what they're looking for for our share of the regional thoroughfare plan that they're planning to do, so FYI on that. And then I guess,
What's their
Lisa-
timeline on that? When do we have to make that decision?
we were the first ones they talked to, because we're the largest stakeholder, I guess. So he wanted to see if we were interested. I said,
Well,
we
this-
definitely need something,
I
so.
think this is a good thing to say, what does our $10,000 to $20,000 get us? If we're paying into this is the 2050 thoroughfare plan, is that what this is?
He didn't put a date on it. He put, the title that, of the sheet he gave us was US 33 to 161 corridor. But he said it was gonna include Broad Street. They really didn't provide us much of a scope. Just said roughly, hey, are you guys interested in something like this? And we said, sure, we're interested in something like this. We wanna see who else is involved and what the price tag's gonna be and what that's gonna include.
My question is, the money that we're already putting into our own comprehensive plan, is that,
So our comprehensive plan, a thoroughfare plan will be part of that, but that's gonna be local.
I see,
What-
okay.
What Morpsey's looking to do is more regional, and that would be working with neighbors.
I'm just trying not to duplicate our efforts and our money.
And I think the thoroughfare plan is a fairly small part of the comprehensive plan, but it is a part of it, but wouldn't be as, all-encompassing as what Morpsey's would be for the region.
10 to 20, is that what you said?
Yeah, that's the impression that he gave us.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, anything else on that? I think this is a huge subject that we need to make sure, this one may be its own meeting in itself eventually here in the next 6 weeks, I would say. That's kind of, so Suzanne, to your point, time frame wise, I think it's kind of a, hopefully we have something here in the next month, and then we can look forward to what we need to do after that, immediately after that, to really push this one forward.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable, Alan?
It does, yes.
I'll make it work.
All right, I like it. All right, so let's go back to the drainage, your drainage report, because this is staggering.
It is.
There's only 7 major projects.
It's only $3.5 million.
Right.
Yeah, that's all. Okay, so we've got 25 years to do all this? Go ahead, give us the highlights if you don't mind. Some of it we're already talked about, and obviously we don't need to go through that.
Okay, yeah, and basically, I figured that I would give this to you guys to take a look at, kind of run through, because there is a lot of information here, and then we could talk more about it later, but it does give the 7 major drainage projects that we've been talking about. I went through each one and kind of gave a summary of the known issues, gave the apparent causes of the issues, and gave the alternative solutions that we are currently aware of, at least. Most of the construction costs are, like I put in the top, very rough planning level estimates. Halloon Lane drainage, for example, that one, there was a study done by Stantec in 2013, 3 alternatives. I added some inflation to their numbers because it is 5 years old at this point. I just kind of reported their numbers. I honestly haven't looked into it too much other than to review that study. I guess, do we feel there's a need to go project by project? I think.
No, I think that we could review this. This is kind of one of those, this is a placeholder, basically.
Yep.
I did want to say, and I know that in your reports to council, you have always put in there, or have recently, over the last year or so, put in there an aspiration
At least a year.
for a storm tax, essentially storm utility tax.
Utility, yep.
I don't know how that's feasible in Pataskala, so I don't know, I mean, I'm assuming you're giving us this to kind of correlate together with that idea,
Well,
how to pay for it?
my goals are primarily to prioritize. I guess establish which projects we think are the city's responsibility.
Okay.
Because some of them, there's an aspect of, is it civil or is it city? And then once we determine what we are going to put on our list of things to accomplish, to prioritize them, I've got an idea of what my priority is. It's shifted from what it was a year ago. We've discovered new things. The challenge that I have is when I'm dealing with some residents, they wanna know why, theirs isn't at the top of the list.
Mhm.
So I guess I want some more input than just mine as to where those fall into the CIP. So I guess I just want us all to look at that and have an understanding of what they are and try to prioritize them, because that can be a challenging endeavor. How do you put one resident in front of another, other than what affects the city and how many people it affects, I guess is the way I try and look at that, but.
Ellen, and this was a discussion I had with someone, and I wish I could recall who it was, some time ago, before you were on board, about the flooding at Taylor and Berry. And they said something along the lines of the drainage that was put in by COTC, that they were supposed to do something, towards the west side with their exit onto Broad that hadn't been done properly. Something along those lines, but that was a huge cause for some of the backup right there. I think that's maybe a little worth looking into, just to, make sure, even if that we don't find that exact information, just to make sure that that is flowing like it should through there. Because I'll tell you, I lived there before that was COTC, and, there was never flooding issues to that degree. That's definitely been since it's changed from whatever that was before, like a dance hall or like an event hall rather. Just out of curiosity, that struck me the other day.
Okay. We'll look into that.
Do you want to take a shot at prioritizing these, Alan, in your opinion, and give just a quick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and what that priority envisions? I mean, as far as, if it's based solely on the number of people it's affecting, I don't know that I guess that's one way of prioritizing. You gotta give us your reasoning behind it. What is it? Is it the properties? This is the property that's being, the potential property damage that could occur. And obviously, the stuff that you think that is city responsibility versus just civil issues. I think I would separate those out. I'd put a part 1. I put a Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2 type of thing,
Oh, okay, so
and
you're
maybe
looking to
separate it
do
out that way.
right now, but to.
And as
Okay.
far, I don't need it. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I would even be, if you want to send it by email, that's fine.
I think that's sufficient.
Just so we could see it and kind of mull it over against your list here.
So split by priority and what I think is city responsibility.
I think that's true. All right, so and just to kind of, anything else on the drainage? So we have other category. One of the other categories that I had in there was an email that I had seen, Brenda had sent with it's in here, I believe, in your explanations, correct?
Broadview Crossing.
Yes, Broadview Crossing.
Yes.
Can you give us kind of a 5-minute synopsis of that? And I read your potential solutions in here also, which are, I went out there myself this weekend
Okay.
to look at it, to see what I would think of. But go ahead and give us a 2-minute synopsis.
Okay, I'll start out with my email to Brenda on Friday afternoon. After I got home and reread that, I realized that I was a little abrasive and maybe scathing and kind of condescending in it. I was trying to get that out because I've been asked about it. So I followed up with an apology email Saturday morning after I reread that, and of course Brenda's sent both of her emails too. So I think we're in a better position there. She's frustrated. I think that came out, and that tied into my frustration a little bit. But I think we're moving forward now. So there's two separate issues. One is the drainage on Miss Sam's property. That is one of the things that I've been working with her on for the past 2 years. She is, of course, right next to the river. There are wetlands delineated either side of her property, and she is in the low spot. And it appears that perhaps her shed is, when we were out there, she said, here's where the water goes, and her shed's kind of in where the water would have gone. I don't know if it's affected it or not, but that's potential. So I think that her backyard, and it's also in the 100-year floodplain, and then identified as other areas that may flood on FEMA maps. Pretty much encompasses her entire backyard. So I think to expect some flooding, some flooding should be expected. As far as what she'd like to do, she wanted to put a swale from her property across the Foundation Park property to the river. Have had some hesitation with that, as I originally did. That's Foundation Park. We don't own that, we lease it, and the foundation would need to be involved in that decision.
I'm sorry, real quick, what is a swale?
Just a ditch,
Okay,
plus or minus.
okay, gotcha.
And then the other option that we gave to her is we have a 24-inch storm sewer that runs on the north edge of her property. There's an easement on her property. And we told her that we would, if she wanted to install some pipe on her property, we would drop a catch basin in so that she could tie into that pipe. No problem with that. That's been on the table the whole time. She has not, I know she says her situation is getting more dire. We're still happy to work with her on that. As far as the ditch, the swale, like I said, that's not really it's not our property, so I don't see how we could make that decision without the foundation being involved. So that's issue number one. In my
Can I
eyes.
interrupt just for a second? Have you dealt with the foundation at all?
No, I've
Okay.
not.
So I've had quite a bit of involvement with the foundation. They're
Okay.
extremely, they acknowledge they put you in charge, they put the city in charge of their property. So
Okay.
if you were to come with a recommendation, this is my suggestion, if you were to come with a recommendation that some drainage improvements need to be made, Sarah would be, I think, she would certainly listen without any problem, and they're gonna take, because the city is the oversight of the property. Now, if you were gonna go in and take all the topsoil off, harvest all the topsoil and sell it, she'd be against that part of it. But putting a swale across it, a mowable swale that isn't causing damage, I would tell you that I would be 99% sure she'd be absolutely okay with it. And she's very, very accessible. It's not a big issue. If you want my help, glad to help.
Okay, my question on that is, being that that could be where we tie in, is that a civil issue or is that a city issue?
Well, I would tell you that I think that's
Foundation?
part two of it, is that's a civil issue.
Okay,
If she's developed if a piece of property has been developed adjacent to the park, and it's in a floodplain and it's known to flood, do we have an obligation to fix it for her?
right.
I think she would behoove her to take us up on putting a catch basin in. Catch basin doesn't hurt anything,
Right.
and she can tie into the catch basin. You could even stub out a couple 6-inch leads
Absolutely.
and let her tie into them, no problem.
Yes.
That would be that is definitely probably the best thing that the city could do.
Yes.
So, anyway.
Okay, so then, I mean, I'm happy to talk to the foundation. I think as we go further down the road with that project, or whatever we do with that, that's probably gonna be needed, to coordinate with the foundation at some point. So I can reach out to them. Sounds like you have contact, maybe if you could.
Oh,
give
yeah,
me a
I'll give
contact,
it to you.
and I can reach out on those issues, and even talk on behalf or tell them what Ms. Sams would like to do, and then get them in contact. So if she wants to do that, then
Rudimentary aerial photo with a line going across it, that's really all they need to know.
so then the second issue is the existing 18-inch tile that runs from the park to the river across 3 backyards. And that one, it appears that the tile was there prior to the development. Whether anybody recognized it was there or not, I have no idea. It doesn't show up on plat, so it probably didn't know it was there. So now there's blowholes in that. In the latest email, Ms. Sams did let me know that she thinks it might be plugged. That had never been reported to us before. So we will go out and verify that it is not plugged, or if it is, we'll repair what needs to be repaired downstream of them. The option that I've given to them prior is on their property. If they want to give the city an easement, we would accept an easement. We would repair, maintain the tile on their property if there's an easement. Otherwise, it's private property and we don't really have a legal right or liability to be there.
Have you talked to our council, not council, but to Mr. Zetz, prescribtive easement on that tile? Because it was there first, and just because we didn't know it was there, doesn't mean there isn't an easement, I mean, a prescriptive easement.
Okay?
Meaning, well, anyhow, ask him, here's my suggestion, ask him if he thinks this would justify a prescriptive easement. We'd still like for them to sign off on it, but essentially, because the tile was there, it has a historic use or a historic position in time, I guess. And since the city's using it to take water from the park to the creek, I venture to guess that one sets up for a prescriptive easement. So
What does that do for us then? You're saying that.
that we could go in and maintain
So
it.
that we could go in and maintain it? Okay. If that's not the case, then I
It's all
guess
your
maybe we don't have that.
alternatives, right? You know, we could reroute it for 300,000, or we could fix it for a lot less.
Yeah, I think fixing it would be the solution. Rerouting it, I don't think is a very good option. And then, of course, the other option would be potentially putting a retention pond up on Foundation Park. That might help. And I do plan to get out there during a major rain event to see. You know, she showed us videos where there's a lot of water coming down through there, but not the source. I don't know where it's coming from. If it's just from the park, or if there's a problem with Broadview Crossing, then we'll go out and take a look at that this Thursday when we go out.
I was gonna say, you're gonna have an opportunity here probably coming up here, and I think it is coming from the park. That's my opinion.
It's what it appears to me, but I mean, if something was wrong in Broadview Crossing or Broadview Court, whatever that is, that we'll be able to see that too.
Okay. So that's Mrs. Sams. That's under other. Why don't you go ahead and give us, I know there may be another one called Main Street. Can you give us an update on Main Street?
I talked to Chad Miller with AEP late last week. He is going to recheck his list of people that where have easements or where we need easements. He is going to put together the new easement exhibit that shows the smaller easement requirement, and resend all of the easement language and exhibits to each of those residents that they still need to have the easements from. And I think as BJ mentioned, I think you mentioned that they are AEP's easements, so we can't go out and get those for them. They need to do that. There might be some negotiation with some residents as to what we need to do so that they'll sign. Prepared for that, at least on one where their driveway is slightly different than what it was before the project, so we might have to do a little reshaping, and I think we can work that out.
I have a question. It's a rough question. I think when we had the community meeting, I thought that was pretty effective. I felt like people, when you meet face to face, are less, I don't know, just angry. And when you see a smiling face or someone that really, I mean, I don't know, I felt like it went well. I did feel like though, that like for me personally, I looked at the map and I remember asking, what were my easements, because I'm just, if you ask my husband, he knows a lot more about it than I, so you're gonna look at different like knowledge in a family but I looked at the map and I recall someone telling me, well, we don't have to really bore into your yard, we just need the easement for repair, like if they need to pull a truck up and they need to work. So is it possible that some of these neighbors of mine don't really need to have the easement where the lines need to be bored under their property, that it's just a maintenance easement? And so that would might like be some type of a giving point, that they don't feel like they're losing anything or someone's gonna come and dig on their property, it's just, they need to know, you know what I'm saying, like, can we tell which easements are places where we have to dig versus easements where we just need to have the space in case someone needs to maintain? That makes sense?
Yes, a large percentage of, especially what is, from Mill Street up like halfway, is just that, where the line is actually gonna be in front of the sidewalk, but they just need a couple feet behind it, for access and for the pedestals.
Yeah, cause once I looked at that, I was like, oh, I mean, I was never like worried about it anyway, just because I want it done. But when I realized that there was no digging at all on my property, it was really just clearance for trucks, I was kind of personally going, so what's the big deal? Because I mean, but so if we could explain or make that clear to our neighbors that, this really isn't gonna, we're not gonna dig, we're not gonna cut, we're not gonna take, we just, if we can find out the difference between the easements, there might be some neighbors that would not be so frustrated or nervous about what's about to happen.
And we've explained that to the people that we've, talked to, at least, in those meetings and
Okay.
such. Because that's a factor, Mr. Van Balen was a large factor, and he did sign
And
off.
he's okay.
He's okay with it now that we've, shortened that easement down, so it seems to me that a lot of people would be, because it used to be, 10 feet or better back from the right of way
Right,
line.
that makes
and now
people
we're-
nervous, cause we have such little properties
Absolutely.
anyway,
Absolutely.
and so to feel like it's gonna be small, I know it's not gonna take away, and it's not gonna be smaller, but you know what I mean, it just makes you nervous. So if there is a difference between the easement, then, that'd be great if some of them knew.
And
I don't
the-
know if AEP does that, or we do that, or what.
And the other challenge with that is the easement language doesn't change whether it's actually,
So it's visual
Flip
of
back
seeing the
or-
map.
so, yeah, well, the language is gonna say that it's for communication purposes, for them to do what they need to do, and some people say, well, that means that it doesn't have to stay where it's at, they can move it here or there, or
Well, do what
wherever.
they, and I know that you're just paraphrasing, but do
Yes.
what they need to do makes people nervous too. What do you
Yes.
mean, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna
Right.
take that, you take the fence down?
Right.
And really, I know that it just means that they're gonna be walking on my property so that they can get to what they need to fix.
Right.
Okay, I
So
don't know.
we will definitely try and clarify that as we
Yeah,
talk to
cause as
people.
soon as I saw it, I was like, oh,
Right.
okay, thanks.
Suggestion I would make on that is when AEP gets their list together of whom they need easements from,
Yep.
that we may get that list ahead of them sending the easements back out. If we could reach out to them and just let them know, look, you're gonna get some more you're gonna get another packet from AEP. If you want to come in and talk with us about it, we're here, we wanna talk with you, we wanna help. You know, we're your advocate just as much as any attorney would be if you want to working with AEP. That way they just don't get it and file it in the circular file.
Right.
They know we're and I'm assuming you're talking 4 or 5 people, right? Somewhere in that
I think
ballpark?
there's 10.
10's fine. Okay, well, if we get that list together, we can at least talk to them and say, we're here to talk with you about it, keep the discussion going, like Suzanne had said. Those meetings were good to get
Yeah, they were good.
to get the people kind of more comfortable. Obviously, 10 didn't get there. Actually, probably they didn't make the meeting, quite
Sure.
frankly. So,
And Chad's supposed to touch base back with me here in 2 weeks, because he was gonna send those all out within 2 weeks from Friday. I doubt we'll be able to get that list and actually get out there and talk to the people between now and then, but at least.
I'm just saying, maybe we put together a little letter of our own and mail it to these people saying, hey, you're going to get something from AEP regarding the Main Street project. These are the resending easements that have been amended. We're here to talk to you if you wanna call us.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion I would make. We really need to get this one over the finish line. I mean, really, I know you're frustrated with it. We really need to get it over the finish line.
In that way, I am not an ag. And
Is there,
Didn't comment.
Use me free to nag for other things.
somebody threw out, so I'll go ahead and repeat it to see if there's any interest in it. My guess is no. But Somebody threw out the idea of a deadline. Is it like, is there a point where we're gonna say, okay, we need these easements, or we're not gonna do, we're not gonna put it underground, it's just gonna stay as poles?
No,
Is-
no, we're putting it underground.
I think, Alan, that we will look at other alternative routes before we'll give up putting it underground,
Okay,
so.
so we're gonna pretty much leave it where it's at and find a way to get it underground, because alternative routes, there's really.
Alternative routes meaning alternative areas that we can put it underground. Maybe
Right, I
other
understand.
methods to get the, so I haven't looked at that, I assume you guys have, but if we have to look at that again, I think we would do that before we give up.
Okay.
Cause it definitely, I mean, it would look unfinished if it's not underground. So. Okay, what other things do you have on your list as others?
RCC at Broadmoor and Hazelwood 5.1, I know Andy had sent that to you. I don't know that we need to have much of a conversation on it now, other than the highlights. So at Broadmoor Commons and at Hazelwood 5.1, both the developers opted to use roller compacted concrete as the base material for the roadway due to it being late in the season and they couldn't get asphalt. We allowed that. But we had doubts as to the finished product. One, that the surface is irregular. They did not string lines to get a nice smooth base course finish. Two, at Broadmoor, there's places you can drag your boot heel an inch deep through what's supposed to be our base material of concrete. So that tells me that it did not cure properly, as we did have below freezing temperatures within the first 7 days of the critical cure period, and they did not put blankets, at least at Broadmoor. Hazelwood 5.1, they did have blankets, but we still, on both of them, there are sections of core samples that we took that are not thick enough per their plans and per our regulations, and they, at Broadmoor, almost 50% of the samples failed strength requirements after you cut off the inch and a half of surface that was bad. And I was gonna say something else with that. So about half of them failed at Broadmoor. And then at Hazelwood 5.1, there were maybe a third that failed to strength, and another, I don't know which ones correlate, but another some percentage, small percentage, 15–20% that did not meet the thickness requirements. So that's going to be a conversation moving forward. Jobs is involved. We've got them the information that we've received what Prime did our cores. GCI did cores for Westport Homes out of Broadmoor. They also took some cores, I think, in the past day or two at Hazelwood 5.1. So there will be discussion moving forward about how they move forward with that. If we make them replace it all, which would of course not be a popular decision for them, to be very expensive. But on our end, how do we know what's good and what's bad, where these samples taken 5 feet apart, one passes, one doesn't. So how do we know those irregularities? And if we do decide to let them do partial, how we establish that? Because obviously we don't want these streets failing within 5 years of them being put in, which is what I fear will happen if they don't do something. So that's the overview. We'll probably be looking for some input, if not now, in the near future.
Yeah, I can say that I witnessed that they did not blanket Broadmoor. They basically merely put visqueen over it, no straw.
Correct.
So their thermal retention was terrible.
Yes.
So to say that was going to be, it was inevitable, that was going to have some problems, I would say that at least what I saw was problematic. As far as the base goes and unevenness, that's fixable as far as leveling courses. As long as you're going to be willing to, as long as we're willing, I assume all this has curbs, so the reveal on the curb is what's going to be the issue. So I've dealt with that before,
Okay.
with RCC not being level, and basically it's a variable, it's a leveling course that handles the first, basically you go and you scratch off all the stuff that's loose,
Right.
come in, put a leveling course in, thicker than what you would necessarily need, and then put your asphalt on top of that, so your reveal's gonna go down to like a 4.
Right. In areas where it's as simple as that, yes, we can we can have them.
Broadmoor's a bigger problem. But I would
Yes.
also say, I'm not familiar with Prime on their testing. So I know that GCI has an enormous amount of experience with RCC,
Okay,
enormous. And some of the testing that they do is probably a little bit more sophisticated, possibly more, just they're familiar with it more than what Prime might have been taking cores. You know, you take cores, depending on your machinery, if you can bust by taking the vibrations will bust some of it up. Anyhow, I've seen that before. But at the same time, I've also ripped out streets. So
Mhm.
it happens. I mean, it happens. So
Okay.
it'll be interesting to see what GCI comes back with.
yeah. And we've got a little bit of theirs from Broadmoor, and they did have some sections that failed. I think their thicknesses were pretty close, but when you look at a picture, there's some thicknesses that are well down there, so.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But we don't, so Alan, I guess I'm gonna not speak for the street committee in general, but I think I speak for a resident of Pataskla. We don't need any more substandard streets. We have those.
Yes. I agree with that 100%, and we're definitely not accepting it as is. There's gonna be some, well, of course, we'll have them propose what they think they need to do, and then we'll evaluate that, if that's sufficient or not.
Be careful of bonding and future, and 5-year bonds and all that
And
other good stuff.
warranties, yeah, I'm not interested in a warranty.
Yeah.
Anything
You know,
right.
The other side of this, and I don't know if we have this in our subdivision regulations, is they can have them as private streets and take care of them themselves. It's an idea. Just keep it in mind.
Okay. Fair enough.
Poor people, that's awful. I live in that world.
Well,
I know,
it is what it is.
it is.
Yeah.
That's what they
Okay,
do.
anything else on your other list?
I have 2 other things on my list, and I will do them as quickly as I can. One is just an update to Mink Phase 2. We closed on the house, so it, I guess it hasn't gone through, but we have keys. And BJ is awaiting the schedule for the asbestos survey. It will happen, it's just we don't know exactly when yet. The other item is the Pataskla Safe Travel Plan for pedestrian facilities at intersections primarily. We talked a little bit about that as part of the ramp. We kind of kicked that out of the ramp. We do have a budget item for this year for $50,000 for engineering. And there have been a couple different things tossed out on that. I think one of the ideas, if I'm not mistaken, was to kind of design everything. But I think that by the time we had the funding to do that, any kind of planning we did now for the whole thing, engineering or cost estimate wise, is gonna be outdated fairly quickly. So my suggestion, my idea was that we break that up into phases, identify the phases. In my mind, there's roughly 4 phases, 1 and 2, in my mind at least, being the 2 intersections here at 310, and then phases 3 and 4 would be Summit and Taylor, whichever one we wanted to do there. So I identify those, still do planning level cost estimates for each. That would gives us an idea of how we want to phase them and kind of vet that. And then look for funding opportunities, and then just go ahead and design phase 1, construct phase 1, with our priorities being not the sidewalks or paths to get between them, but the priority first being the intersections to get people across intersections. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for process moving forward with that.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to your main phase 2 with this house.
Yes.
Has anybody reached out to Shelley Company to see what kind of change orders we can expect
And
for
sorry,
our
I said
mobiles?
that was phase 2, it's actually phase 3.
Phase 3, right.
We have talked to Shelley Company. The first thing we did was verify what's included and what's not included in the demolition of the house. Asbestos was specifically not included. Big surprise.
Mhm.
And then while we were having that conversation, it was mentioned that, the terms they used were rebidding the project, but for the remaining items that we haven't already paid for or have been installed, I don't see it so much as a rebidding as a renegotiation. And I do expect them to come back with probably 10-15% increase on the items that we've not installed.
Are you talking about rebidding for their upcharge or rebidding for the material costs? I would
Material
qualify
input.
that with them and say, look, we're willing, if you had proposals for demo that were 10,000 and now they're 12,000, I can understand that. but their percentage
Mhm.
shouldn't go from 5% to 12%.
If it's a sub doing the work, right? I think
Correct,
they're-
it will be a
they're looking
sub,
for
they have to be a sub, because
material-
they have to be licensed, they will be a sub.
Okay, yeah, they're looking, well, and it's not just the demo, it's the, so we already bought the signal poles, so they're not gonna upcharge us on that, but the labor part of it, they're gonna be looking for labor increase. So all the labor and materials that have not been installed, they're going to be looking for an increase in price, which is fair being that that's 3-year-old pricing.
And please document all this, because this is gonna bring up Stantec again. I keep bringing it up, and we don't seem to be too excited about, you know, ringing their doorbell and saying, hey, guys, you cost us X dollars on this one, and Main Street, you cost us X dollars on that one.
Oh,
So
no.
please document it.
I don't think we can close the door on that. I don't know if there's any sort of statute of limitations on that kind of work.
There is.
Then we need to pursue that, because that's litigation. In my book, that they were negligent, and it's cost
That's why we're
us
still dealing with Main Street, is
hundreds
because
of
Well,
it's
thousands
there's a
of
laundry
dollars.
list of them, and, you know, Main Street, Mink are both big ones that we had to deal with. So, and I'm sure you've been, I know I'm preaching to the choir, you had to deal with even more than that.
Yeah, and I guess my perspective is I'm not against that. From my seat, as you know, I mean, this is, the list that we have here is just a fraction of what I have to deal with, and I really don't have, anybody to push that off on. I can for Jobs for some stuff, but, there's a laundry list of things that I can't get to, and that would just add to those, especially with all the development we have, that takes a large percentage of my time. So, I'm not saying I'm not interested, it's just finding the time and prioritizing that as an item.
Let's add that to our next, we'll put that as number 15 on the item list for next time, because we need to really decide how we're gonna proceed with that, because I'm sure Mr. Zest will tell us that we are bumping up against the statute of limitations. So, and we don't want that to happen.
It's at least 7.
Pardon?
It's at least 7 years.
7?
Yeah.
Well,
And it
Main
might-
Street's now, we're at 5 with Main Street, so,
It might
Are we at
increase.
5?
No,
I think it's 3.
3, because it was
Well,
started during Dan's last year,
including design or just
Yeah,
construction?
that'd be on.
probably 4.
Yeah, that'd probably be
2015
against-
was design.
You're close, Andy, yeah.
so I just wanna bring it up, I don't wanna be in that situation, and Alan, I'm not looking to put more work on you, but,
Yeah.
this is a big issue,
Right.
and it may not be, you add it all up, it may be a substantial amount of money, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, we'll put that as another item on our list, we can get to 20 here pretty quickly, I bet. Anything else, on your other list?
That was it on my other list.
Anything from the committee for another list? All right, I don't have anything else either. When do we wanna try to, we've got an ongoing list here. Alan, does it make sense to try to do these, monthly? Do we wanna try to hit these? I mean, I know some of these we don't have updates, and that's okay. But I think the ramp is a big issue in my book for where we're, I'm hopeful, so that you get the ramp out, we get the results back, that's when I'd like to meet next.
Okay,
Is that 4 weeks away, you think? You're gonna put the ramp out by the end of this week, per se?
that's what I'm trying to do.
And then is it 3, are you gonna allow how many weeks to get your proposals back?
I think we gotta give at least 3, if not 4, just to, give people some time to react and get something together.
So we're kinda we're staring at 6 weeks to get together.
Well, I would recommend that we take a look at our list, and kind of break it down into timeframes, so we could meet, even if we had to meet more often and specify specific
Do
topics.
a drainage one, do a ramp
Yeah,
one,
so if we had
do a
to-
traffic study one, I would agree with that.
That way we can focus on it. I know, just for me personally, that when we're in here and it all makes sense and I'm talking, but then when I go to recall it, or, it's a lot of information to, absorb, and I end up listening to the tape a couple times, trying to remember it all. So I think if we could start to kind of parse it down a little bit, that would be helpful, and we might even get more out of that. Just a suggestion.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Why don't we try to have a meeting in 4 weeks?
Okay.
Try to hit that. We'll probably, and then Alan, I'll work with you to take this and kind of group it into, one of them is gonna be the impact on Licking Heights. That, I think, is a 4-week discussion. We should be ready to talk about what we're doing with the city, what we're doing with Morpsey, and so forth. And then we can hit some of the others, the Oak Meadow was gonna be one that we're gonna be able to hit in 4 weeks without any problem. We won't be able to hit the ramp. Well, we can talk about the drainage project scoping and priority. And hopefully we'll have information on the concrete issues. Maybe we'll have even more on Main Street. I think we can take this to make it probably 6 items that we can talk about in 4 weeks.
Okay.
All right?
What's the date for your next?
So the date, you're gonna ask that.
The 12th is a Monday,
It's gonna be Monday, March
Fifth,
4th,
actually.
or
5th is council meeting,
5th is council meeting, so 12th would be our meeting.
and the time, 5's good for me, if you
5,
guys are okay with
5 it is.
I can get here by then.
And with that, I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hayes,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter.
Yes?